The first time you realize you're becoming wealthy, it doesn't feel like you're getting richer. It's 724 on a Thursday morning. You're standing alone in a hotel bathroom, adjusting a suit that cost more than your first monthly rent. On your wrist is a 380 watch you bought 3 months ago because, at the time, it felt like the kind of thing successful people were supposed to own. Your phone vibrates on the marble counter. Paycheck deposited $5,900. You almost smile, then another notification appears. Investment account to $6,400 this month. You stop. You read it again. You just made more money from your investments than from your job. And suddenly, the watch feels different. 3 years ago, you bought it so people would think you were doing well. Now the number nobody can see is quietly doing more for your future than anything you could wear. You walk out of the hotel. The valet brings you a 5-year-old Honda. 2 men standing beside you are getting into brand new Porsches. One of them looks at your car. You don't care. At least, you don't care anymore, because 5 years earlier, you would have cared more than you'd ever admit. Back then, you were 24. You made $54,000 a year. You had $2,700 in savings, an old car, a cheap apartment, and a growing feeling that everyone your age was moving ahead without you. Everywhere you looked, someone had something you didn't. The better apartment, the luxury vacation, the expensive watch, the new car. You didn't think you were jealous. You thought you were falling behind, so you started buying evidence that you weren't. First, the car, then the apartment, then the clothes, then the watch. And every purchase did something dangerous. It made you feel richer without actually making you wealthier. Until one day, without realizing it, your life split into 2 possible futures. One version of you kept buying things that looked like wealth. The other started buying something nobody could see, time. And 15 years later, the difference between those 2 versions of your life would be worth more than anything either of them could have bought, because one of them was trying to look rich. The other was becoming impossible to control. At 24, you don't know any of this. You just know that 54,000 feels like a lot when you're sitting in your parents' kitchen talking about your first real job. The offer is of $54,000 with a small annual bonus. You read the number 3 times. Your mother tells you it's a good start. You agree. But then you open Instagram. A guy from your college class is in Miami. Another just bought a Mercedes. Someone you barely remember is posting pictures from a rooftop restaurant, where dinner probably costs what you spend on groceries in a week. None of these people necessarily make more money than you. You don't know that. That's the problem. You only see the result. You don't see the debt. You don't see the credit card balance. You don't see the monthly payment. You don't see the money sitting in their investment accounts. You see the picture, and your brain fills in the rest. Within 6 months, you move into a nicer apartment. It's $450 a month instead of $950. You tell yourself the extra $500 is worth it because the building has a gym, underground parking, a rooftop, and a lobby that makes you feel like you've finally entered adulthood. Then comes the car. Your Honda still runs. But you start noticing it when you pull into the office. It has scratches. The air conditioning is inconsistent. The interior looks old. Nobody says anything about it. That's almost worse. So one Saturday afternoon, you walk into a dealership. You tell yourself you're just looking. 3 hours later, you're signing papers. The payment is $4.79 a month. You drive home feeling different, not wealthier. Important, and that distinction is easy to miss when you're 25. For the first few weeks, you park farther away from your apartment just so you can look back at the car before walking inside. You take a picture of it. You send it to a friend. He says, "Bro, you made it." And for a moment, you believe him. That's how the trap works. Nobody has to convince you to spend more. Your own emotions do the work. You get a raise to $62,000 the following year. Instead of feeling richer, you feel like you finally have permission to upgrade again. Better clothes, better dinners, weekend trips, a new phone, then the watch, $3,800. You hesitate, not because you can't get approved, because you know you shouldn't buy it. But the salesperson tells you something that makes the decision easier. You'll have it for years. So you buy it. And when you walk outside wearing it, you feel a tiny shift. People don't suddenly treat you differently, but you imagine they do. That's enough. For a while. Then one Tuesday night, something happens that nobody else sees. You open your banking app, checking call $4.12. Savings, $180. Card balance of $4,760. Car payment due in 6 days, rent due in 9, and your watch is sitting on the nightstand. 3,800. You stare at it for a long time. You don't feel rich, you feel trapped. That is the first crack in the old version of your thinking. Not because you suddenly become disciplined, but because you finally notice something you've been avoiding. You have been spending money to create the appearance of financial progress, while your actual financial position is barely moving. The next morning, you make a decision. Not a dramatic one. You don't sell everything. You don't become a minimalist. You don't start wearing the same shirt every day and announcing that you've discovered the secret to wealth. You simply create one rule. Before you buy anything to impress someone, you have to ask what that money could become if nobody ever knew you had it. At first, the question is annoying. You want the new shoes. You want the nicer apartment. You want the car. You want the watch. But now every purchase has a second price. Not just what it costs today, what it could become later. You cancel a planned vacation. You keep the same phone. You start cooking more. You sell a few things sitting unused in your apartment. Then you open an investment account. You put in 100. That's it. $100. It doesn't change your life. Nobody notices. Your friends don't congratulate you. There is no screenshot worth posting. But something important has happened. For the first time, you own something whose entire purpose is to become more valuable while nobody is looking. You increase it to $200 the next month, $250, then $300. You automate the transfer so you don't have to make the decision every payday. And this is where the story becomes boring, which is exactly why it works. You don't wake up wealthy. You wake up and go to work. You get paid. Money moves into your investment account. You pay your bills. You live your life. 2 weeks later, it happens again. Your friend buys a new BMW. You notice. You almost feel behind. Then you check your account. 8,700 impressive, not life-changing, but yours. 6 months later, $11,400, a year later, $18,000. You realize something strange, nobody knows, and somehow, that makes it feel better. At 27, you get another promotion. Your salary moves to $700 to $6,000. This time, you don't upgrade your lifestyle immediately. Your old car is still running. Your apartment is fine. You keep them. The difference between your income and your lifestyle gets wider. And you send that difference somewhere else. Your friends notice eventually. One asks why you're still driving the same car. You laugh. Because it works. He thinks you're joking. You're not. Then the market falls. Hard. Your account drops from $30,000 and $24,000. $7,000 disappears from the screen. You feel sick. For 2 days, you consider stopping the automatic transfers. Why keep putting money into something that's losing money? But then you remember what you're actually buying. You're not buying today's balance. You're buying ownership in your future. So you keep going. 300. Every month. The market doesn't care that you're scared. It doesn't care that you checked your account 4 times that morning. You keep buying. And 6 months later, the account recovers. Then it passes the old high. Then it keeps going. That's when you understand the second rule. Wealth isn't built by making every decision correctly. It's built by refusing to destroy the system every time you become uncomfortable. At 29, something else changes. Your company offers you a new position. $94,000, but the office is 90 minutes away. The schedule is brutal. And the salary comes with the expectation that you'll upgrade your car, because you'll be meeting executives and clients. For the old version of you, the decision would have been obvious. More title, better car, more status, but you calculate what the extra money actually buys. More commuting, more stress, a more expensive lifestyle, and another opportunity to increase your spending just because your income increased. You take the job anyway. But you don't buy the car. You negotiate remote days. You keep your old Honda. And for the first time, you're making a financial decision without asking how it will look. That feels like freedom. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind where you realize you don't need strangers to approve of your decisions. At 31, your investment account crosses $100,000. You look at the number. Then you close the app. That's new. 3 years earlier, you would have taken a screenshot. Now you're thinking about something else. Your money has started producing money. Not enough to retire. Not enough to quit. But enough to change the equation. A few $1,000s of market growth can happen while you're asleep. You still have to work. But every year, a larger portion of your financial progress no longer depends entirely on your next paycheck. That is the moment the direction changes. Your job is still important. Your income is still important. They aren't carrying the entire future anymore. Then life tests the system. Your mother needs help with a major home repair. 8,000. At 25, that number would have terrified you. At 31, it hurts. But it doesn't destroy you. You pay your share. You don't put it on a credit card. You don't sell investments at the worst possible moment. You don't panic. And after the payment is gone, you realize something bigger than the money itself. You have options. That is what wealth was buying all along. Not watches, not cars, not restaurants. Options. At 33, you could buy the luxury SUV you've wanted since you were 25. You can afford it. That's the important part. You can actually afford it. And you don't buy it. Not because you hate luxury. Not because you're trying to prove you're disciplined. Because you finally understand the difference between being able to afford something and being willing to trade your freedom for it. You buy a 3-year-old car instead. You pay it off quickly. Nobody notices. You don't care. Around this time, your old friend with the BMW at 25 gets promoted. His income is now higher than yours. He has a beautiful house, a newer car, a collection of watches. From the outside, he looks like the person who won. Then one evening, you have dinner together. He tells you he's exhausted. The mortgage is expensive. The cars are expensive. The house needs work. His kid's school costs more than he expected. He says something that stays with you. I make more money than I ever thought I would, and somehow I still feel like I can't slow down. You don't tell him your investment balance. You don't tell him that you could take a year off if you absolutely needed to. You don't tell him because that's not the point. The point is that two people can earn similar money and build completely different lives. One can maximize the appearance of success. The other can maximize the amount of control they have over their own time. At 35, your account crosses done 300,000, then 400,000. The numbers start moving faster. Not because you suddenly became a genius, because the machine has had enough time to become noticeable. Your contributions are still important, but now the growth itself is becoming meaningful. A year later, you get offered another promotion. 140,000. This one comes with a corner office, a larger team, a company car, and 70-hour weeks. You read the offer. Then you look at your calendar. You think about the evenings you already have, the weekends, your parents, your relationship, your health, and you turn it down. That decision would have been impossible at 25. At 35, it feels obvious. Because money has finally stopped being something you chase. It's becoming something that gives you choices. That's the part people don't see. When you stop spending to look successful, your financial life doesn't necessarily become glamorous. It becomes quieter. Your clothes might look ordinary. Your car might look ordinary. Your apartment might look ordinary. Your life might look completely unremarkable from the outside. But underneath it, something is happening. Your debt is shrinking, investments are growing, your expenses are controlled, your income is diversified, your emergency fund exists, and, most importantly, your dependence on every single paycheck is slowly decreasing. At 38, you finally understand what that old 3,800 Dodge was really trying to buy. It wasn't time. It was validation. You wanted people to see evidence that you were successful because you didn't yet have evidence inside yourself. But the funny thing about real wealth is that the more secure you become financially, the less interested you become in proving it. You don't need the room to know. You don't need the waiter to know. You don't need the neighbor to know. You don't even need your friends to know. Because the number that matters most isn't the price of what you own. It's how much control you have over what happens next. And then one morning, 15 years after that first $100 investment, you find yourself back in a hotel bathroom. Different hotel, different suit, different life. Your phone is on the counter. Your paycheck has arrived, $5,900. Then the investment notification appears, plus $6,400. You stare at it, not because you're shocked anymore, because you remember when 100 felt insignificant. You remember the Honda, the cheap apartment, the credit card, the watch, the person you were trying so desperately to convince everyone you had become. You walk outside. The valet brings your 5-year-old car. The Porsche is still there. You don't feel superior. You don't feel jealous. You just get in and drive home. Because the real victory wasn't becoming the person with the most expensive car in the parking lot. It was becoming the person who could leave the parking lot whenever he wanted. That night, you open the drawer beside your bed. The old watch is still there. You don't wear it much anymore. Not because it's worthless, but because you finally understand what it represented. A younger version of you thought wealth was about being seen. You now understand that wealth is often about being unseen. The money nobody knows about. The debt you never took on, the investments you kept making when the market was falling, the promotion you turned down, the car you didn't upgrade, the vacation you skipped, the purchase you didn't make, the lifestyle inflation you quietly refused. None of those moments looked impressive. Most of them felt like nothing was happening. But they were happening. Every one of them was purchasing a little more freedom. And eventually, enough little decisions become a completely different life. So maybe the question isn't whether you can afford the watch. Maybe it's whether you can afford what the watch prevents you from becoming. Maybe the question isn't whether you can afford the luxury car. Maybe it's what happens to your future when that payment leaves your account every month for 6 years. And maybe the question isn't whether other people think you're successful. Maybe it's whether you have built a life that doesn't require their opinion anymore. Because there are 2 ways to look rich. You can spend money until people assume you have it. Or you can keep money until you no longer need to prove that you do. One gives you attention. The other gives you options. One makes people notice you. The other gives you time. And eventually, if you keep choosing the second one long enough, something strange happens. You stop wanting to look wealthy. Because you realize you already have something much more valuable. You have the freedom to stop performing. And nobody can see that from the outside. Which is exactly why it works. If this story changed the way you think about looking rich versus actually becoming wealthy, subscribe to Wealth Code. And tell me in the comments, what is one thing you could stop buying to look successful and start buying your future instead?